So it is about to be my husband's birthday, and then the following day is our 10-year married anniversary. And I decided to give a little attention to him and our relationship because I think there are so many beautiful teaching tools that have happened in it and really beautiful ways to find love that might look different than what you're hearing from someone else. And so often we'll hear about these lists, and you got to put this list down, and you got to put down all these things that you want, and then you got to like stay true to that list and make sure that you don't settle. And the truth is that the list is often made from a version of ourselves that doesn't know what we need and doesn't know all the possibilities out there, and often a very wounded version of ourselves. And so when I think about my husband and myself, like in a million years, if I looked at my list back in the day, it would have been they had to be raw vegan. It would have been they had to be really into yoga and like all this natural stuff and just all these things. They had to surf. And like the funny part about that is that my husband's none of those things, and yet he couldn't be a better partner for me. And what I realized in the time is that that version of me that wrote that list was deeply wounded and still very much in a incredibly unhealthy relationship with her body and with food. And I chose that list because it kept me in that story, because that was the story that I knew. But while I was in this journey of finding me, I decided to move back to New York, and I was in this place where I was just going to say yes. And I often tell my clients, just go on a journey of saying yes sometimes. And so I was saying yes to everyone who asked me out. And I said yes. I walked into this bar one night and I sat down next to someone. I didn't know the name of the bar. And I turned and I asked him, and he said it just opened. And he described the menu, and it was Scottish foods. It was all meat and blood and all this stuff. At the time, I was raw vegan for 5 years and very, very proud of it. He looked at me after he described the menu, and he said to me, "You must be vegetarian, aren't you?" And I said, "No, I'm raw vegan." And he said, "Oh, I'm the chef." And we only had a moment to talk, but he asked me for my number. And for some reason, I gave it because I said yes. I was in a moment of yes. And we went out on our first date 2 days later. And he didn't make sense. You know, my original list had all these things on it, and he wasn't fitting any of them because there wasn't a burger that he didn't want to eat, you know. And here we were, and I stuck to my raw vegan. I stuck to who I was. But what I kept on doing was saying yes, because every time I was with him, I felt safe, and I was happy, and we were having fun. And so on paper, we made no sense, but in energy, we made total sense. And so we both kept on saying yes, even though society would have told us to say no. And here we are 12 years later in relationship, 10 years later married. And I will tell you that he is my greatest healer. And it's because I chose someone who I didn't have this pre-projected idea of who I was supposed to be with, who I was told from a very young age, and then who kept me in my stories. He was someone who was so outside the box that really introduced me to a version of myself that I didn't know was possible. And so when we're looking at relationships, it doesn't mean that we have to find someone completely different than ourselves, but it means we want to be open to the idea that someone might bring out a different version of ourselves. Because ultimately, the people who we're in relationships with, the reason why we choose them is because how we feel in us when we're with them. That's how we know we're picking the right people. And so while for him, it's not always happy, it's not always joy, sometimes it's hard. You know, we have an almost 2-year-old, sometimes it's really hard, but I feel safe, and I feel I'm allowed to be me, and I'm allowed to grow, and I'm allowed to change. And, you know, there's something really special about that. And so when you're looking to find relationship, I think it's important for us to remember that we don't always know, and we don't want to always create patterns, and we don't always want to go from places of, you know, where we've been before, because it might not be bringing us to where we need to go. And so the relationships masterclass is one of my favorite things because I talk about all different things: how to be in relationship, how to notice relationship, how to call in relationship, and really understanding that at the end of the day, you knowing you and how you're reacting and how you're projecting and how you're allowing other things to project onto you is what will call in the best relationships. And that can be in romantic relationships, that can be in work relationships, that can be in so many different relationships, friendships, family, being able to see things differently, because there's so many different views that can happen. And so if you're looking to have better relationships in any and all aspects of your life, I highly recommend that you join us in this beautiful journey called Relationships, the Masterclass, because I am beyond proud of the work, and I am beyond proud of the tools that I've used to create a life of relationships that feel good even when there's struggle. So I invite you to come along.